Welcome to No Sweat MMA, where we break down every fight in every UFC card, giving you an idea of where to place your bets and also which ones to avoid. And from a betting standpoint, this card sucks.
This is number one bullshit.
We got heavy favorites that honestly might not win, and we've got fights that should go over 1.5 rounds or 2.5 that might not. And it's like trying to navigate across a minefield. Let's start with the prelims. Most of the fights in the prelims are pretty hard to judge because they're either low-level fighters or very old fighters. Starting off with the first fight of the night, we got Juliana Miller fighting against Ivana Petrovic. Honestly, both are pretty low-level fighters in the women's flyweight division. Looking at the records, you got 4-3 in the UFC, fighting against Petrovic, who's a bit better at 7-2. And aside from the record discrepancy, Petrovic also has a 4-inch reach advantage, which could play a big role because Miller is pretty bad at striking. And honestly, pretty bad at everything except probably jiu-jitsu. But in order to do that, she would have to out-wrestle Petrovic, which I don't think she can. To complicate matters further for this fight, looking at their fight histories, neither woman go to decisions very much in their wins. But they usually lose by decisions. Of course, the competition they're fighting isn't the best, so we can't take a look at these numbers and take them too much for granted. But it does put a shred of doubt in the, almost automatic over 1.5s for women's fights. Looking at Miller's history, she did win the Ultimate Fighter, but then she lost her next two UFC fights in pretty dominant fashion. And Petrovic, who's actually the better fighter of the two, actually took Jamie Lynn Horth to a split decision, which, bodes pretty well for her chances against Miller. So yeah, Petrovic is the favorite, as she should be. What bets can we place here? This is from D Ratings. Of course, Petrovic is the favorite here. We can look at some single bets here. Probably Petrovic money line with the over 1.5. If you want to be a little bit risky, get a slightly better odds. Parlay piece, I think this is the only thing you can do with this fight. Petrovic money line at minus 250 right now isn't too bad of a price to pay. Especially when the fight is the first fight. So, if it goes wrong, you can always just reset your parlays. But I don't think it will go wrong. I think it's pretty safe to say that Petrovic will win this first fight. Next fight in the card, we have two heavyweights, Thomas Peterson and Don'Tale Mayes. Both are pretty low-level heavyweights. They're not the best, as you can tell by the record, especially of Don'Tale Mayes. But he does have significant height and reach advantage, although it doesn't matter too much because he doesn't really throw that many punches, and nor are his punches that hard. Peterson has higher volume and, can wrestle, so that's looking good, and that's why he's probably the favorite. Looking at their fight histories, being heavyweights, as we would expect, they would be more finishes, but can't take that to heart here because this could very well be two just boring heavyweights, throwing 1 to 2 punch combos. So, betting under here could really burn you, in my opinion. Looking at Thomas Peterson's fight, it looked pretty good, honestly, until he got knocked out by Gaziev. And, that's something to worry about when you're betting Peterson this fight because it could happen again. Although I don't think Mayes has the same power as Gaziev to knock out Peterson, but it's definitely something to worry about. And as for Mayes, he just goes in there, doesn't have too much to offer, throws a few punches here and there, 1 to 2 punch combos, and pretty much loses. So, having said all that, probably a fight is just to avoid in general. But if you really must touch this fight, Peterson is pretty heavily flavored on D ratings. Moneyline Peterson on a single bet, not really good. You could, dabble with the over or under depending on what you're feeling. Honestly, wouldn't recommend it. What's the point? Peterson moneyline and over 1.5 combination does seem like it can hit with reasonable probability. As for parlay pieces, feel free to put in Peterson moneyline or over 1.5 here. Again, I'm just saying you could, but I wouldn't. I just don't see too much point in putting any money in this fight. All right, moving on, we have Gaston Bolanos versus Kwang Lei. Both of these fighters are actually not bad. Gaston Bolanos actually just beat Cortavius Romius in his last fight. And Kwang Lei is, he's an interesting prospect. Looking at their record, it's pretty similar. Age, I mean, they match up pretty well physically and from an age standpoint. Looking at their fight histories, yeah, nothing too much here. Nothing crazy, nothing standing out. Looking at Gaston Bolanos and his fight record, he's a pretty good fighter, honestly. He's not bad, no glaring weaknesses. Likes to do his spinning stuff. I don't really think he can do it at this level against better fighters. But all in all, I think he is a better fighter than Kwang Lei. Looking at Kwang Lei, his loss to Long Zhao is what's giving people problems when it comes to trusting him. Because Long Zhao isn't a very good striker, and he got TKO'd by Long Zhao. So, yeah, that's why Gaston Bolanos is a favorite. And at minus 150, like it's really good, right? It's probably one of the best money lines value-wise, and it's even better now. It's at 138 right now. So it's a pretty good single bet. And given that neither of them have too much one-punch power, I think Kwang Lei probably can survive 1.5 rounds. So pairing up the Bolanos KO/decision, because again, I don't think Bolanos is going to submit Kwang Lei. So if you pair the Bolanos KO and decision combination, I don't know if you can or not. Certain betting sites do offer that. If not, you can just do money line. But if you pair that with over 1.5, you get plus money. You get plus 130. That's not bad. For parlaying, of course, you can parlay the Bolanos money line. And the over 1.5 is a pretty good parlay piece at minus 300. You're not really risking too much. And you're not, looking stupid with a minus 1,000 parlay piece that, if it doesn't hit, then it's just terrible feeling. Over 2.5, you could as well. I wouldn't, because what's the point, right? Over 1.5 is enough of a sweat. Yeah. All right, next fight we go. And this is probably one of my favorite fights of the card because of its predictability. We got Marina Rodriguez and Jillian Robertson from Canada. Yeah, Robertson is the favorite, as she should be. I'm actually kind of surprised that the line moved the other way. I thought it was going to get wider, but it's actually getting a bit better for us. If you're betting Jillian Robertson, the age is a big difference here. Marina Rodriguez is 38. Never a good thing when it comes to the UFC, right? Very hard to actually win fights when you're that old against someone who is relatively young. And from their fight history, we know that Jillian Robertson is somewhat of a submission specialist, although Marina Rodriguez doesn't really get submitted ever. You never know, right? It could be a first time for everything. They're both very durable, right? You can see that they usually, if they were to lose, they would lose by decision, which fits really well with the women's MMA idea of going over 1.5 or even 2.5. Looking at Marina Rodriguez, right? She did have a good, promising run early on, but as of late, she's just not. It just feels like her time has come and passed. I think she's, I don't know if her heart's still in it. And looking at Robertson, she's looking down here, she did have a lot of losses, but then that was because she was in a different weight class. Once she's changed weight classes, she's done really well, stringing up a nice win streak. And styles make fights, right? Robertson is a takedown or bust fighter, and she is probably going to get Marina Rodriguez down. And once the fight goes onto the mat, it's pretty much over. Or at least the round is pretty much over, right? And then the next round could be rinse and repeat. If we look at the bets here, Robertson is heavy favorite by D ratings, as she should. I think Robertson money line is kind of a waste, honestly, because you could easily just do submission/decision if you can. If you cannot, then just stick with money line. As single bets, right? If you're gonna do Robertson, probably pair it with an over 1.5 to get a better, to get less juice. And then if you want to be risky, right, and you really think she can submit Rodriguez, I don't recommend it. But if you do want to, you could do Robertson sub. And then, if you can pair it with an under 2.5 rounds, because you might as well, right? What are the chances of her submitting Marina Rodriguez in the last 2.5 minutes of round 3? But what I love about this card is in the parlay, right? Very, very safe parlay pieces in Robertson money line. It doesn't, it's just a few of these minus 300s together, and you're looking at a 2x or a 3x. Robertson sub and decision if you can. Over 1.5 is also pretty safe. Next, we have Ryan Loder versus Azamat Bekoev. I think that's how you say it, right? Bekoev. Both of these guys are actually pretty good. Loader just beat Robert Valentin, the guy who was one of the boringest fights with Tourette's Finney a few fights ago. Loader beat Valentin because Loader is a wrestler. Loader is a division win wrestler. He won the TUF, and he's fighting, Azamat Bekoyev, as you can see by the record. Bekoyev is pretty good. Loader is, doesn't have too many fights under his belt, only 8 professional fights, which is a point of worry because, the experience edge definitely goes to Bekoyev. Looking at their fighting history, nothing crazy to note. Again, like I said, Loader beat Valentin. I was really impressed with that win because Loader was the underdog. But when I rewatched the fight, he got Valentin in a crucifix. And anytime there's like a crucifix win, it's a little bit, because I don't know how much of it was actually planned versus just, the luck. When you get someone down, their arm happens to be trapped between your legs. So it was a terrible position for Valentin. He couldn't get out, and that's why Loader just elbowed him to oblivion and won. But wrestlers are always good, right? Wrestlers are always good, especially in the UFC. Azamat Bekoyev can also wrestle, but he's definitely got the striking edge. And if he does get the takedown, he'll just ground and pound you like he did to Zach Reese. Bekoyev is minus 400. I don't think he should be minus 400 against Loader. But then it's not like I think Loader can win. I think Bekoyev still wins, but I'm just not feeling minus 400 confident, right? Minus 400 was like Ming Yang against Anthony Smith last card, and that was easy, right? That was, everybody knew that was going to happen. With Amorim against Polyana Vienna last card as well. She started off at minus 400 before ballooning to minus 800. But that's what I want to look for in a minus 400. But I don't see that in this fight. I feel like Loader can either survive longer than he can and not get knocked out in the first or second rounds like people think. Or he might even just score an upset win. But if Loader was to win, it would probably be by decision because I don't see Loader finishing Azamat. So yeah, so here's the bets. For the single bets, you compare Bekoyev with under 2.5. Again, I wouldn't do that. I'm just saying it's not terrible. It's reasonable just to cut down on the minus 400 price line. And Loader by decision, right, is a super, as you can, plus 600, plus 650. But you might as well. If you're going to go Loader, you might as well pair with decision. And then for parlay pieces here, don't really love any of these, honestly. Like the round betting here is just, it could be over, it could be under. Who knows? Bekoyev could get the first takedown and just ground and pound Loader. Or this could be just a wrestling match, right? Or just, I don't know. So this is not a good fight to bet on. Next up, we have Yana Santos versus Miesha Tate. That's right. Miesha Tate is still fighting. Unbelievable. And, they're both 35, 38. They're both really old. They're not that good anymore, right? And I think it's not just like the physical age, but their fighting age, right? Miesha Tate is so old school. She's famous because she's been around forever. But her fighting skills isn't just, you just can't compare that with newer fighters, right? The type of training and everything. And Yana's just average at very best. She's just average. Neither of them are very good anymore, at least. Looking at their fighting history, it's just a mix of everything. Nothing crazy here. Yana Santos just beat Chelsea Chandler in a decision. Chandler just got destroyed by Jocelyn Edwards last card. So that win isn't aging too well. And before that win, she's lost 3 straight fights, although most of them have come by decision. So the over is looking pretty good. Miesha Tate, before the rear naked choke on Julia Alvia, had her own 3-fight losing streak. Yeah, hard to bet. Hard fight to bet on. I wouldn't really want to do anything with money lines here. Santos as an underdog is understandable. I think it's a good underdog. I don't think it's a gimme. But as far as underdog goes, it's not bad. For single bets, if you're gonna do Tate, you could do a combination of submission and decision, right? Point betting is also really good here because this fight, most likely will go to the scorecards. And I do think Santos can probably at least win a round. If not two, then she'll win the fight, right? So Santos with 3.5 points, basically meaning that if she just wins one round, you're good. You win, no matter whether she loses 29-28, across the board. It doesn't matter. You're still good. So that's not bad. And as for parlay pieces, the over 1.5, I put a lock there because I do think it's going to happen, but it's minus 650, right? So it's getting to the area where, if it hits, great. It's not going to make your parlay go any better. But if it doesn't hit, then you're going to sit there and think, why did I put that in my parlay? So yeah, I'll leave that to you guys to pick whether you want to include that or not. But I do think it's pretty safe. Not going to lie. Next, we have the main card. The main card, a lot better fights, especially to watch, but not necessarily to bet on. For example, the very first fight, Jeremy Stephens against Mason Jones. I couldn't believe that Jeremy Stephens was back fighting. He was, he went to LFA, then he went to bare knuckle fighting, and he's back. He's back. I think it's because it's his hometown and everything. He's fighting Mason Jones, and obviously Mason Jones is a lot younger and has a much better record and just better physically across the board. That does come with a hefty price tag of minus 575. I think it's like minus 550 now. But yeah, I mean, looking at their fight histories, Jones does seem pretty durable, but that could be the level of his fights. Jeremy Stephens, I mean, if you're watching this video, you probably have heard of him from Conor McGregor's Who the Fook is that guy? That guy was Jeremy Stephens. Had a 3-fight win streak in bare knuckle boxing before coming back to MMA, back to UFC rather. Yeah, Jeremy Stephens is Jeremy Stephens, right? We all know what he's gonna do. He's got power, right? He's got aggression. He's got power. He's going to probably land. And if you can survive his punches, you win. Because he's very hittable. And, he's Jeremy Stephens. He's very hittable. He's not going to, win and out-grapple you or anything like that. He's just going to come and try to punch and try to hit you in the face. Mason Jones actually took kind of left the UFC. I'm not sure if I don't think he was cut because it was only after one loss. So he left the UFC to fight into like a regional promotion or something, and then got some easy fights looking at the guys he's fighting, a guy who's 13-7, and now he's back in the UFC. He's probably better than Stephens at everything except for maybe punching power. I do think he's a good wrestler, I think, right? So if he does get this fight to the ground and just control Stephens and ground and pound, he should win. But the price is a bit too much. I don't feel nearly as confident in Jones surviving that 1 or 2 punch that Stephens can land. And I most likely Jones will win. How is Jones going to win? Who knows? It could be a decision. Stephens is really tough. Or he could be a finish, like a submission or a knockout. So for single betting, you could, go for a Jones KO or sub. Basically, Jones not to win by decision at plus 130 is not bad. Under 2.5 rounds is minus 130. Again, I'm not so sure I want to do that either. Parlay pieces, I mean, I put a lock by Jones money line just because I think he is going to win. But that's not very convincing, I hope, for a minus 575. So yeah, best not to do anything with this fight, in my opinion. Next, we have Cameron Smotherman versus Siri City. And both of these guys are, they're pretty good. They're both pretty good, as their record shows. Smotherman is the underdog, but I think, I honestly think he should be the favorite. So he's one of probably my favorite underdog in this entire card to bet on. And that's not just because of his skill set, but also because, City hasn't really shown anything in the UFC, right, that he can win consistently as a favorite. Looking at their history, it's clear that they're both just, kind of kickboxing background, KOs or decisions, not much submissions going on. And if we look at their fight history, Cameron Smotherman beat Jake Hadley short notice as well. So that's impressive. And that, makes me more confident in his ability to pull off the win this week. City, split decision after split decision in the UFC, and that's not very good. If you ever want to bet money line on him, just you don't want to go to split decision, right? You never want to go there. So that's another reason to avoid City in this card. Looking at the betting, I know D Ratings has City as a favorite. I'm not so. I don't agree with that. I really do think that Smotherman, money line is good at plus 110. If you do want to play a safer, you can do Smotherman with 3.5 points. Again, just ensuring that he wins one round, right, is enough to get you to win. Parlay pieces, the over 1.5, I do like. And its price tag of minus 300, I feel very good about that one. Just because I don't think either of them are going to get finished or finish the other fighter in the first round and a half. Yeah, so I think over 1.5 is a good parlay piece, and Smotherman is a good underdog bet for this card. Moving right along, we got Montel Jackson and Daniel Marcos. Both of these are they're both really good fighters, I think. Daniel Marcos is undefeated, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? No one ever stays undefeated unless you are Khabib Nurmagomedov, or I guess John Jones if you don't count that elbow fight. And Montel Jackson, really, really good fighter. He's got power. He's got good striking. They both have good striking. And I think it just comes down to whether Marcos can survive Jackson's power early on. You can see Jackson has a major advantage in reach and height. And of course, Marcos is undefeated. Looking at their fight histories, again, not so much submission to worry about here, just either knockouts or decisions. Both are very tough. Montel Jackson has only lost by decision. Marcos has never lost. Looking at their fights, Jackson completely annihilated Damone Blackshear, who just won right in the last card. Blackshear in round 1. Yeah, just good stand up, good punches. Marcos, very very good chin. I think Marcos is very tough, and I'm not sold on Marcos yet as a undefeated fighter. I do think he's going to get humbled, and I do think it's going to be Montel Jackson this week. Although toughness can win fights, right? Because Montel Jackson could get gassed and just lose the last 2 rounds. Betting wise, there's value in betting Marcos as an underdog, I think, right? Jackson for KO/decision is a good bet for Jackson because he's not going to submit Marcos. So why bother with the money line? And for parlay pieces, I do like the over here. Not as much as the other ones because it's minus 370. And, you never know with Jackson, right? It could be a first round knockout. He just got one earlier. Who knows? But Marcos is tough. So it's still pretty much a lock. But I would rather do the overs for the Robertson fight or even the Smotherman fight than this one. Moving right along, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Daniel Rodriguez, D-Rod. Again, 2 old fighters. This is kind of like the Yana Santos and Misha Tate kind of thing. Kind of similar, right? Both are 38. They both had a long time fighting. A lot of fight years accumulated. And yeah, that's worrisome, right? When you have 2 very old dudes, there's a high chance of this just becoming a very boring fight, or one guy just gets knocked out right away. We don't know. Looking at Ponzinibbio, he does have a knack for either losing late or losing by decision or winning late in round 3. His comeback wins, right? That you might be familiar with, especially his recent wins against Carlston Harris. Yeah, and D-Rod, D-Rod's just D-Rod, man. He's tough. He's got good boxing. You can tell that he's aging, right? He's slowing down, but he's still D-Rod. He's tough. Looking at these 2, how do we bet this? Money line, I'm just not a big fan. It's a toss-up for me. I would rather bet D-Rod than I would for Ponzinibbio, just because I feel like D-Rod is tougher and can survive and be more consistent in his output over 3 rounds. But that's not saying too much. You can always throw in the Ponzinibbio win in round 3 for plus 1600. Right? Why not? Throw in whatever. It's happened 2 out of his last 5 fights. Why not? Parlay pieces, I do like the over 1.5 quite a bit for this because I see this going the distance. I'm not going to bet it going the distance because you never know. But I'm fairly confident in over 1.5 at minus 260. Again, it's in that sweet spot where it won't hurt your parlay. It'll only help your parlay. All right, moving on to the next fight. We have Renier de Ritter versus Bo Nickel. High level, highly anticipated fight between these two. Bo Nickel is, of course, undefeated. Renier de Ritter just came to the UFC and has 2 wins over GM3 and Kevin Holland. And looking at the history, de Ritter obviously is a submission grappling specialist. But his losses are actually more concerning because he's got knocked out. Actually, no, he got knocked out once or twice. The third loss was when he just gave up. Like he literally just laid on the canvas and told the ref no. He shook his head to the ref, like, I'm done. I don't want to fight anymore. And that is a little bit worrisome because what happens if Bo pressures him, right? And he gets tired and gasses and quits. So that's something to keep in mind with a de Ritter fight, is that he actually did quit in the octagon or in the ring in a different promotion. Looking at de Ritter, I think, it was against Anatoly Malikin, retirement in round 3. He literally just gave up. He just gave up. He gave up. He didn't want to fight anymore. In the UFC, the Kevin Holland win in round 1. I'm not going to read too much into it. Kevin Holland is Kevin Holland, right? Like you're never gonna predict Kevin Holland. He's just there to have a good time, make some money. So he just played right into de Ritter's game plan. With Meerschaert, like that's the fight I actually want to use to help judge, de Ritter's chance against Bo in this fight. Like it was a close fight, and they both looked like gassed and slow. Every round. It was. I don't think GM3 was ever in danger up until he got choked out, but it was a pretty close fight, honestly, for the first 2 rounds. So that gives me some confidence in backing Bo Nickel. And because Bo Nickel, right, he's obviously good, he's undefeated in MMA. That one loss you see is from grappling. That's a different story. But he's very good. He's very good. Obviously a wrestler. He's a very good wrestler, but he's very smart, right? And everyone says that his fight with Paul Craig was terrible and blah blah blah. I mean, it wasn't very fun to watch, but he did what he had to do. Like that was his best option to win that fight. That was the best path to take, and he took it. So that shows me that he's smart, right? He's not gonna go in there and do Kevin Holland things. He's going to go in there and give himself the best chance to win, and he's athletic. I would say he's much more athletic than Renier de Ritter, right? So whether it's striking, footwork and whatever, I do favor Bo Nickel if it's stand up. And I don't think he's going to shoot for that many takedowns on de Ritter, honestly. And I don't think de Ritter can shoot on Bo. So I think this fight, if you guys watch YouTube and watch other channels, everyone's saying the same thing, right? This could just be another Paul Craig Bo Nickel fight again. So if that's the case, right? If it walks like a duck, and talks like a duck, then it's probably going to happen. So my favorite bets here would be, right, to go with either, over 1.5 is really safe for parlays. I think it's only minus 200, right? I mean, I really think this fight's not going to finish that early, right? Nickel's smart. He's not going to just go in there and give de Ritter his neck. Nickel money line at minus 400. I think he wins. So you can still bet it and parlay it and whatever. But if you're going to do Nickel money line, you might as well pair it with over 1.5, right? And if you're not sure that Nickel can, stay away from Ritter for 3 rounds, then feel free to just to do over 1.5, and then who cares who wins, right? So the over 1.5 at minus 200 is really good in this card. In a card where we actually lack any good lines for like confident bets, this would be it. I think minus 200 for over 1.5 for this fight. And our main event, of course, we got Corey Sandhagen versus Davison Figueiredo. Corey Sandhagen, I think, is minus 550. He's favored to win. He should win. Davison Figueiredo is a lot older. A lot more fights under his belt as well. Height advantage for Sandhagen. Not much of a reach advantage, although it doesn't really matter because it's the fight is going to play out in in everyone's eyes, the fight's going to play out where we have Figueiredo. I think will be competing with Sandhagen. But I think Sandhagen just is just better in every single category, whether it's behind the jab, behind the knees, the elbows, right? Takedown defense. I think Sandhagen just hasn't covered. I'm just worried about Sandhagen gassing in rounds 4 and 5. Not as bad as Ian Machado Gary gassing against Prates last card, but same type. I'm kind of worried about the gas. Looking at their fight histories, nothing worthy of note. They're both pretty tough. Looking at Sandhagen's fight history, he did lose a decision to Umar, right? Although Umar is pretty good, as we could tell from his fight with Marab. Yeah, I mean, he does have a lot of losses too. He lost to Peter Yan a decision, TJ Dillashaw. He's got losses. He's not, like unbeatable. He's not, like Islam Makhachev, right? But he's good. He's good. Figueiredo, on the other hand, also lost to Peter Yan recently. Before that, had a 3-fight win streak. He is, most people will consider him one of the GOATs of the division, as he should. Minus 550 though, and plus 400 is a bit too steep. A little bit disrespectful, I think, to Figgy, because he's not washed. He's not done yet, right? He's still pretty good. Betting here is, I feel like you just bet the rounds. You just bet the rounds, right? If you've had a really rough outing in this card, you can, just put it on over 1.5 to make some money back, right? Because over 1.5 is free. It's pretty much free. I don't see this fight ending in the first round and a half, because in a title fight, no one really just goes all out in the first round anyway, right? The first round's like a tester. Round 2 is where it starts kind of picking up. So over 1.5 is as free of a bet as we can have in any card. But the price does show at minus 850. But I mean, free money is free money, I mean, there's no value in it, but it's still free money. You'd pick up a $5 bill on the ground if you see it, right? So it's free money. Over 2.5 is probably the sweetest spot, where we're not sweating, right, for a Sandhagen gassing out at the end, because we just have to make it to the middle of round 3, which I think is very, very doable. And I don't see neither of these two guys finishing each other, before round 4 anyway. Over 3.5, I don't really like as much, because now you're going to the round 4 territory, and your price isn't that good at minus 300. So why, right? You might as well start coupling up a Sandhagen win, right, with the overs, like a Sandhagen over 2.5. It's a good one, honestly. Sandhagen over 2.5 at minus 250 is not too bad for a easy win, I think. At minus 250, it could help your parlays, right? You can even single bet it. And then Sandhagen win by decision. It's a popular bet. It's minus 150. So you don't want to see that, right? You don't want to see 5 rounds and hope your guy wins all just for minus 150. But, it's probably going to happen. So that's why it's minus. Between those two, I would definitely favor Sandhagen over 2.5. I don't mind the extra juice I'm paying for the certainty and less stress. And yeah, that is it for this card. Let's take a look at the live dogs here for this card. My favorite ones are Yana Santos, Smotherman. My favorite, the favorite, is Smotherman. Marcos and Rodriguez are both good underdogs to bet on as well. Not saying that they're all going to win, of course, but if you're going to bet on the dogs here, these are the 4 guys you will want to, or 3 guys and 1 gal, that you want to pick from. And for the favorites, these 5 favorites are the most locked, I think, to win. Especially Jillian Robertson, I think, is very, very good at minus 300. Bo Nico at minus, but he's minus 400 now, so it's not as great. Petrovic, should win, because the fighter she's fighting against just isn't that good at MMA. But neither is she, so you decide there. As for round bettings, these are the round betting for each fight that I would recommend if you were to do round betting. It's all overs here. This card, this card is really, really, really. I see this card happening with a lot of decisions. But you never know, right? There's always that one weird fight, like Chelsea Chandler and Jocelyn Edwards last card, right? That fight ended in round 1, where everyone thought it was going to go over 2.5. So you never know. But the ones I was most confident in, I already told you guys in the video earlier, so go back and watch it if you want. But these are the round bettings that I think are pretty safe for this card. Thank you for watching, and yeah, Best of luck. I will make another video on Sunday after the card to kind of go over everything, and we're going to keep track of, the accuracy, the percentages that I hit on my locks for betting, so then we can keep track. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next card. Bye.